Okay, let's get right at it with former Undersecretary of Defense, former VA Secretary. He is Colonel Robert Wilkie. He's back with us. First, thank you for your service to our country. Generals Milley, Austin, and McKenzie. Colonel, they testified today to Senate Armed Services that, yes, we recommended to the president keep 2,500 troops in Afghanistan. The president said to ABC's George Stephanopoulos he was never told that. What do you make of this?
Well, it was a remarkable day, and it's good to be back with you, Liz. I've never heard in my 30 years experience, and even going back in history, 2 4-star generals and a retired 4-star general openly contradict the President of the United States. As Undersecretary, I worked with General Milley and very closely with General McKenzie, and I never believed that McKenzie would have sanctioned an operation like this. And now we know that the senior leadership of the Pentagon kept advising the president that this would end the way it ended if he did not retain the capability to protect Americans, but also to deter the Taliban. Regardless of what you think about our presence in Afghanistan, whether we should have stayed for the long run or not, that's irrelevant. What happened on the ground is right at the feet of those in the White House, the National Security Council, and ultimately with the President of the United States.
You know, military experts agree the withdrawal was a fiasco. It came in the context of the entire 20-year chaotic war. Generals Milley and McKenzie also confirmed they told the president, don't do a rapid withdrawal. Afghanistan will collapse. Republicans, including Senator Blackburn, say this push to rush out resulted in the deaths of 13 troops and abandonment of countless citizens and allies. That's a heavy thing to have to deal with. What do you say?
It is a debacle. The Economist was right that this is Biden's debacle. 13 Americans were lost. We were exposed to the world, at least under this administration, as a paper tiger. He's ripped asunder the Western alliance. And don't just listen to me. Listen to Merkel and Macron and Johnson, who've said that this man has done more damage to Western unity than any president since NATO was founded in 1949. This is a train wreck of cataclysmic proportions, and we still have another 3 years left of it.
The chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, he testified today that, yes, he did talk to the Washington Post reporter and also Bob Woodward. He talked to other Washington Post reporters. He talked to the Wall Street Journal when they were working on their books. He's admitting that, yeah, I did talk to them. He also said that the Taliban repeatedly violated President Trump's Doha agreement. The Taliban never broke its affiliation with al-Qaeda. Colonel, there's also highlights we have that we'd like you to react to from today's hearing. Watch this.
General Milley, it's your testimony that you recommended 2,500 troops approximately stay in Afghanistan?
My assessment was back in the fall of 20, and it remained consistent throughout, that we should keep a steady state of 2,500, and it could bounce up to 3,500.
General McKenzie, do you share that assessment?
Senator, I do share that assessment.
It's a simple question, Secretary Austin. He said no senior military leader advised him to leave a small troop presence behind. Is that true or not? Did these officer and General Miller's recommendations get to the president personally?
Their input was received by the president and considered by the president, for sure.
On August 18th, in a media interview to the American people, the president said that none of his military advisors told him that he should keep U.S. forces in Afghanistan. General Milley, that was a false statement by the President of the United States, was it not?
I didn't even see the statement, to tell you the truth.
I'm reading you a truthful statement. That was a false statement.
Yeah, look,
I don't have a lot of time.
Okay,
was that a false statement to the American people?
I'm not going to categorize a statement of a president of the United States.
President Biden keeps calling it an extraordinary success. We've discussed some of this today. Is leaving Americans behind an extraordinary success in your view? Secretary Austin?
We're not leaving Americans behind.
Yes or no is fine. Is the killing of 13 American servicemen and women while trying to secure a chaotic evacuation of the president's own making an extraordinary success?
The loss of any civilian life is always tragic.
Your top military advisors warned against withdrawing on this timeline. They wanted you to keep about 2,500 troops.
No, they didn't. It was split. That wasn't true.
So no one told, your military advisors did not tell you, no, we should just keep 2,500 troops?
No one said that to me that I can recall.
How can you not recall that when the generals testified that, yeah, we did tell him that?
Well, that's exactly right. But look, this is a 40 to 50-year pattern with Joe Biden. Remember, in the one major foreign policy success of the Obama administration, the killing of Osama bin Laden, he was foursquare against that. He's been wrong about the Soviet Union. He was wrong in Vietnam. And the sad thing is that in those days, he didn't have his hands close to the levers of kinetic power. And now he does, and Americans have suffered because of that. The notion that a president of the United States would ignore sound military advice just designed to protect Americans, not to carry out some grand strategic vision that the president didn't happen to agree with, but to protect young Americans in many cases, Americans and our allies who had given so much to the cause. That is unfathomable, and you really can't find anything in American history that compares to that.
You know, Colonel, let's stay on also this. By the way, General Milley testified he did nothing wrong with this phone call to China, he was saying he'll give China heads up if there's military action under Trump. There's a lot of controversy over that. But the Pentagon chief, Austin, said he can't confirm or deny if 4,000 Americans are still stranded in Afghanistan. One number has it at 100. We have breaking news. A charter flight just flew 100 Americans out of Afghanistan. Your take on this? Pew Research is now saying that 55% of Americans don't have confidence in the Biden White House to adequately vet the roughly 95 Afghans coming in. What do you say to that?
Well, I think they're absolutely right. And you led in with Liz with the piece about the southern border. It's the same mentality. They're unleashing thousands and thousands of people into the United States who haven't been vetted. It's the same thing with Afghanistan. We don't know who we've taken out. This is a colossal failure. And what you saw on the part of the majority in that committee today was constantly bringing up Donald Trump. Well, Donald Trump's been out of office for 9 months, and the situation on the ground changed drastically. When he left, the Taliban was emboldened because they're pretty good political actors, too, and they certainly understand Mr. Biden's track record, and they took full advantage of it.
Colonel Wilkie, thanks again for your service to our country, and thanks again for coming on.